Hey guys, tonight we're polishing rust and regrets in a moonlit armory. No dragons or damsels here, just you, a half-melted candle, and a breastplate that's seen better centuries. You kneel on flagstones that have cracked under heavier boots, your breath fogging iron older than your great-great-grandfather's lies. The candle flickers, casting spiderweb shadows across dents from battles no one sings about anymore. Fun fact, 14th century chainmail could stop an arrow at Agincourt, but not your knight's pride when his mistress threw a wine jug at his head. Reality check. You probably won't survive polishing a 14th century breastplate without slicing your thumb open. Bloodstains are way harder to buff out than rust, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your nearest city and current time below, Reykjavik at midnight or Sydney at dawn. Lets me feel cosmically connected to your insomnia. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The breastplate perches on the oak bench like a gutted tortoise, cold even in summer heat. Your rag grinds across a gash from the French front, though you've heard drunk knights blame everything from barbarians to bad shaves. Wax pools around the candle's base. You swear it's shaped like the kingdom they swore to protect. Here's a tidbit for your next tavern trivia night. Medieval squires sometimes used walnut oil to condition their hair. Nothing says noble service like smelling like a squirrel's pantry. You scrub harder. The scrape of steel on rag echoes like a blacksmith's ghost, clapping sarcastically. Moonlight slants through arrow loops, turning the armory into a cage of silver bars. Historians still argue whether squires ever stole armor polish to use as shaving cream. Your money's on desperate dudes with peach fuzz. A moth dives at the flame, its shadow ballooning across the wall into a dragon-sized omen. You flinch, knocking over the whetstone. It rolls into the corner where the knight's tabard molds quietly into wallpaper. 3 careful breaths, the kind you took before tightening his greaves on mornings crusted with frost. The candle sputters, throwing your shadow against a rack of lances that'll never skewer another boar. You lean closer, studying your warped reflection in the breastplate. Your eyes look 40, your mouth still 16 and trembling. Did you know crusaders sewed saints' relics into their gambesons? They'd march into battle smelling like frankincense and grandpa's tomb. A spider descends on its thread, landing where the knight's heart should have been. You let it crawl onto your finger, its legs tickling like forgotten strategies. The midnight bell tolls once, a sound that once meant saddle the horses, but now whispers steal the good cheese and run. Your knees creak as you stand, arthritic symphonies brought to you by winters spent scrubbing snow from stirrups. The spider flees into a crevice. Tactic manuals never covered 8-legged squatters. The armory door groans, wind sneaking in to riffle through discarded blueprints for trebuchets that never launched. You catch a whiff of lavender from the gardens, same scent the knight's letters carried before they stopped coming. Bet you didn't know some lords wore perfumed armor to battle, because nothing intimidates enemies like smelling like a deceitful rose garden. You lift the breastplate, lighter than you remember, and press your forehead to its frozen curve. The iron tastes like a blood-rusted coin under your tongue. Maybe it's the sleep deprivation, but you swear the candle flame dims when you whisper his name. Across the room, a mouse drags a scrap of parchment into its nest. Let historians debate whether medieval mice plotted coups. You're busy wondering if that's your grocery list from 1397. Dawn's still hours off, the moon's glare now bleaching the rust into something almost beautiful. You blow out the candle, smoke curling into the shape of a banner you once followed without blinking. Silence settles like dust on vambraces. Somewhere beyond these walls, a nightingale screeches at the absurdity of it all. You sit very still, grief pooled in your lap, until the first sparrow's chirp tells you it's time to pretend you've slept. Your calloused thumb finds the deepest scar in the breastplate, a ragged canyon stretching from collarbone to rib. They called it the Battle of 3 Rivers, though you've waded through those shallows and only counted 2. Rust flakes cling to your skin like dried blood. The iron smells of old rain, or maybe the metallic tang of fear soaked into steel during Hastings' slaughter. Historians still argue whether chainmail or plain stupidity killed more Normans that day. You press harder, as if the dent might sing its story. Metalworkers once brewed swords in vinegar and urine, a stinking process to toughen blades. This gash reeks of cheaper shortcuts. The knight's smith favored pig's blood as a quencher. Each ridge feels like a braille ode to bad decisions. 3 generations of armory mice have nested in this very cranny, their tiny claws adding fresh scratches to the legacy. The candle gutters, casting shadows that twist the scar into a grinning mouth. Hungry, you mutter, brushing off crumbs from your 3rd-day-old scone. Someone should have told medieval lords that pageantry rusts faster than armor. You flick a stray oat from the breastplate's hollow. Let future scholars debate whether it's ceremonial debris or the world's saddest last meal. A splinter of moonlight catches the wound's edge. You imagine the war horse's scream, the way its falling body would, dented mud and reputation alike. Farriers once braided horsehair into armor linings for luck. Now you're picking stallion dander from crevices like some graveyard groom. Your thumbnail snags on a corrosion bubble. It bursts, spewing ochre dust. The knight swore this was his lucky breastplate. Seems his definition of luck involved surviving battles, but losing 6 wives to dysentery. Dawn creeps in its light, exposing flecks of gilding beneath the grime. You wonder if the original owner felt pride when donning this metal skin. Politics of the Sword Age baffle you, lords slaughtering peasants over landslides or bad harvests. Your pinky traces a secondary groove, a repair job from the siege of Chalons. 17 different smiths hammered this thing. Historians still argue whether ancient battle cries sounded heroic or like constipated boars. The armory's chill seeps into your bones. You pull the breastplate closer, its weight familiar as regret. Metal whines as you rotate it, a sound between a sigh and a death rattle. 257 rivets hold this relic together. You've counted them all during endless polishing sessions. Rust never sleeps, but by God's beer-stained tunic, it naps in circles around your workbench. A spider dangles from the gorget's rim, its legs skating across your reflection. Even vermin move smoother than you in all that plate. You blow gently, sending the spinner sailing toward a moldering tapestry. The breastplate slips, its edge biting your thigh through worn linen. Pain blooms sharp and bright, a welcome break from numbness. Blood beads where the metal kissed you. Payback for the oat, maybe. Your fingers find the dent again, deeper than last year's wine cellar, wider than the tavern wench's grin when she overcharged the night for ale. Legends claim Charlemagne's armor was lined with silk to stop arrowheads, a luxury this brute lacked. Sweat and straw stuffed his padding, crunchy by summer's end. You scrape a blackened fleck from the gash, flakes spiraling like ash from a pyre. Breath mists the scarred surface. For a heartbeat, the flaw disappears under condensation. Then clarity returns, harsher than a tax collector's knock. You could fill this crevasse with wax, melt down all those unsent letters into a sealant. Instead, you let the imperfection breathe. Some wounds outlive their owners, whispering long after mouths go quiet. A drop of your blood slides down the breastplate's curve, bisecting the scar. Red meets rust in a marriage older than heraldry. Tomorrow you'll scrub it away. Today you let the stain linger. Proof that fingers remember what history books smooth over. The armory clock chimes its hands, as unmoving as the knight's smile in his portrait. You heft the breastplate onto its stand. It lists sideways, a drunken sentry guarding empty racks, as sunlight finally floods the room. The arrowhead winks at you from the pauldron's edge, a blackened fang, half buried in steel. Historians still argue whether English longbowmen aimed for horses or let God guide their shafts. Your knife tip pries at the shard. It refuses to budge. 6 centuries hasn't softened its grudge. Light glints off the fracture, a miniature moon trapped in metal. Battlefield scavengers once sold arrowheads as love charms, claiming they pierced hearts twice. You snort. This one's romantic potential died with the goose feather fletching that carried it. A splintered memory surfaces, the knight cursing as a surgeon dug for arrowheads in his thigh. 76 stitches, and 2 flagons of mead later, he'd named the wound Matilda. You grind your thumb against the embedded metal. Cold seeps through your calluses, ancient blood chill, preserved in iron. Midnight rain taps the armory roof, each droplet echoing the thwip of arrows finding homes. The siege of Harfleur comes to mind. Henry V's archers loosing 18 shafts a minute. Your arrowhead's flanges suggest a bodkin point, designed to punch through mail like parchment. How many ribs did it part before lodging here? You rub the pauldron with vinegar-soaked wool, a futile attempt at reconciliation. Medieval smiths often forged arrowheads from church roof lead during sieges. Sacrilege, but effective. This one's surface bubbles with pockmarks, holy alloy corroding unholy fast. The candle gutters, light catching the barb's cruel curve. Surgeons used goose quills to probe arrow wounds back then, a practice borrowed from Roman battlefield medicine. You snap your knife shut, the click startling a bat overhead. Maybe some truths should stay buried. Dawn filters through arrow loops, striping the armor in prison bar shadows. Your fingernail traces the impact crater surrounding the shard. 5, maybe 6 layers of steel folded here. The knight's smith hammered desperation into every inch. A spider descends, thread anchoring to the arrowhead's tip. You watch it repel toward the breastplate's hollow. Even vermin understand repurposing. Military manuals claim Saracen archers shot flaming arrows wrapped in biblical scrolls. You doubt this sparkless relic ever lit more than a smith's temper. The armory door creaks, wind sneaking in with autumn's first chill. You shrug your tunic tighter, grateful for wool over chainmail. Crusaders burned their linen undershirts for warmth during the Acre siege. Madness, but cold reshapes men faster than battle. Twisting the pauldron, you study the arrowhead's exit wound. The interior spikes outward, a metal flower frozen mid-bloom. Farriers' ballads claim war horses recognized archers by their bowstrings. Twang. Did some destrier rear, spoiling the shot that birthed this scar. Your whetstone screeches across the pauldron's ridge, the sound sawing through memory's velvet. Arrow shafts were marked with charcoal stripes for ownership disputes. No traces remain here, just rust blooming through steel pores. A draft stirs the cobwebs above their shadows, trembling across the arrowhead. You imagine it vibrating again, humming with released tension, before finding rest in this metal tomb. Tactics manuals urged archers to aim for the V of nasal helms. This one came close, skimming the knight's jaw before steel interception. Your knife makes a 13th attempt, blade slipping to gouge fresh silver across oxidized black. The arrowhead leers, secure as a miser's vault. Tourney clowns used to juggle spent projectiles between jousts. You're half tempted to try anything to break the stalemate. Thunder growls beyond the armory walls. Lightning flash, the arrowhead becomes a starfield in miniature. Medieval gamblers played dice games with numbered arrowheads, 3 for a shilling, 6 for a lover's favor. You pocket a rust flake, might as well get something from this bargain. Rainwater seeps under the door, snaking toward your boots. You lift the pauldron clear, its weight uneven, with embedded history. Water mirrors on stone show the arrowhead inverted a pit rather than a peak. The armory's cat brushes your ankle, its purr vibrating up your shin. Not now, you murmur, though you scratch its mangy ears. Battlefield cats were supposedly immune to arrow volleys, slipping between shafts like liquid shadow. This one couldn't dodge a bread roll. 3 precise taps, your knife hilt against the stubborn protrusion. Charlemagne's engineers built arrow-proof siege towers, layered with soaked hides. This pauldron's defenses held barely. The splintered metal edge bites your palm, drawing beads of crimson. A moth lands on the arrowhead, wings fanning, as if to resurrect its flight. You hold your breath, half expecting the shard to dislodge and soar. When it doesn't, you exhale laughter sharp enough to startle the moth away. Moonlight replaces stormlight, silvering the arrowhead's ridges. Shakespeare got it backward. Exit wounds are kinder than entry. This metal flower's petals curl inward, cradling the violence it swallowed. Distant bells mark the hour. Your reflection warps in the pauldron's curve, a funhouse mirror version of the Squire who began this task. Crusaders swore saltwater, rusted Saracens steal faster. You doubt they stuck around to test the theory. The arrowhead remains obdurate as the day it struck. Surgeons would have debated removing it, risk the blade's breakup versus infection. You sheath your knife. Some ghosts demand their lodging be paid in full. Dawn finds you asleep against the armor rack, pauldron cradled like a stillborn child. A beam of light strikes the arrowhead, transforming it into a golden thorn. It'll still be there tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. A single black feather spirals down, landing where the gauntlet's fingers curl inward. Dawn bleeds through the armory's arrow slits, striping your boots in bloody light. Ravens clatter at the barred windows, their beaks cracking the morning's stillness like nutshells. Medieval castle keepers kept them as messengers, winged scribes carrying threats wrapped in gut string. You pinch the feather's shaft, expecting a sharp quill. Instead, it bends, weather softened from scouting autumn storms. Legend says tower ravens peck out spies' eyes. But this one just cocks its head, black marble, eyes judging your sleep-creased tunic. The gauntlet's knuckles press into your palm cold as a crypt handle. Wings buffet the shutters again, 3 beats quick as a bard's punchline. You rise, chainmail coif rattling loose down your back. Ravens shadowed crusaders to battlefields, waiting for first pickings. This duo seems impatient. Historians still argue whether castle birds recognized lords by their crests, or just the smell of impending meat. Light thickens, red seeping across the flagstones. Your shadow stretches, a spindle-limbed giant pinned beneath the feather's weight. Ravens were banned from French kitchens for stealing silver forks. You snort, tossing the plume toward the windows. Wind snatches it, twisting it into a spiral even the birds ignore. The male raven croaks, a sound like wet wood splitting. His mate answers mocking. Her throat pouch pulses, a black bellows pumping night into day. Monks once wrote Bibles using raven quills, believing their dark sheen warded off heresy. The ink probably smelled like stolen eggs and arrogance. You lift the gauntlet, threading the feather into its articulated wrist. Rust flakes snow onto your boot. Perfect. Now it's accessorized for a warlock's ball. Dawn's glow turns the metal scales copper, a cheap alchemy, even the bird's side-eye. One raven slaps its beak against the bars, impatient as a siege engineer. You mockbow, sweeping an arm toward the armor rack, feasts that way unless you've gone vegetarian. The bird blinks. Its ancestor probably attended Agincourt's aftermath, dining on English and French without prejudice. Cold air nips your ears. It'll freeze the moat by week's end. The ravens puff into feather balls, medieval pillows with murder beaks. Viking scouts tracked ravens to find land, but these two clearly memorized the fastest route to the butcher's offal pile. Sunlight hits the breastplate, revealing a handprint in decades-old grease. You press your palm over it, smaller by 3 finger widths. Ravens stole thatch from cottages to line their nests. 12th century insulation with better craftsmanship than your palate. The female bird croaks again, a sound that could curdle milk. Wind shoulders through the window, tousling the feather in the gauntlet. It twitches, a pathetic semaphore. Crusaders tied prayer scrolls to raven legs, as if God employed avian couriers. You wonder if the birds laughed all the way to the nearest midden. The male raven squawks, launching into the pewter gray sky. His mate follows, wingtips brushing the armory's limestone walls. Dawn's bloody light fades, leading man blush, giving way to matinee realism. Ravens outlived every lord who kept them, mocking eternity with every croak. You pull the feather free, its vein crumbling like ancient parchment. Ash from yesterday's burnt letter clings to your nails. A philosopher once claimed ravens mourned fallen knights by plucking their own feathers. More likely, they were just bored. Outside, iron-bound cartwheels creak toward the marketplace. The gauntlet sits empty again, its cuff gaping like a hungry mouth. Ravens circled scaffolds during executions, feasting on fear before the axe fell. This pair prefers breakfast service, scavenging sausage casings from gutters with princely disdain. Your stomach growls, a peasant revolt in the making. The feather's remnants cling to your tunic, black smudges on homespun gray. Castilian brides sewed raven plumes into veils to ward off cuckolds. Judging by their divorce rates, feathers make shitty marriage armor. Shouts rise from the training yard, sparrows now compared to the night's roaring glory. The ravens bank westward, ignoring human noise as always. Chroniclers swore they nested in Charlemagne's lance, but historians still argue whether that lance ever left Aachene's dusty reliquary. You chuck the feather's stem into the brazier. It curls into smoke without ceremony. The gauntlet lies where you dropped it, catching dust motes in its palm. Sunrise stained it briefly noble now. It's just scrap iron again. Ravens know better than anyone gold paint chips. Coppery light floods the armory once more, sun rising higher. You flex your hand, knuckles popping like wet kindling. The ravens are specks now, commas, punctuating an indifferent sky. One day, they'll peck your bones clean too. You almost envy their appetite. The whetstone rasps against steel, a dry laugh grating through the armory's stale air. You're not sharpening death anymore, just scouring its fingerprints off the metal. Medieval squires used stale urine to polish armor, the ammonia masking bloodstains, and vomit from the final feast. Your rags just vinegar and spite. Rust cascades like red dandruff onto the workbench. Each stroke peels back layers. The battle of 3 rivers, here the siege of Blackmark there. Historians still argue whether camp followers polished armor mid-siege, or just let knights fester in their own filth. You bet on filth. The vambrace reveals a dent shaped like your childhood thumbprint. The day you begged to train, whetstones got buried with master smiths. Apparently, the afterlife needs tools for endless blade maintenance. Yours came from the knight's corpse, a parting gift, clenched in rigor mortis fingers. You hum a tavern tune as it scrapes, off-key notes blending with the scratch, scratch, scratch. Stress relief for people who hate peace and quiet. A fleck of tarnish becomes a continent, your thumb erasing borders. Scholars claim Charlemagne's squires gilded dents to hide weaknesses. But that's just rich people propaganda. Poor bastards like you rub craters raw until they gleam with Stockholm syndrome. The gauntlet's knuckle spikes catch your sleeve, pulling threads like they're still hungry for a brawl. Dust motes swirl in a sunbeam, tiny spectators to your Sisyphean spa day. You spit on the breastplate, watch droplets slide through dried gore grooves. 17th century pages swore dragon blood corroded armor. But this is just rotted boar sausage from a long ago victory feast. The stench clings like a creditor. 3 raps at the door, a loose hinge mimicking knuckles. You freeze mid-scrub, ravens, drunk stable hands. The sound doesn't repeat. Whetstones double as doorstops in 8 kingdoms. Yours props open a manual on falconry the knight never read. Chapter 4's spine sags creased where he'd kicked it under his cot. Brass rivets wink under your rag, conquest tchotchkes gleaming with false pride. Your reflection warps in the pauldron, nose stretched, eyes squashed into raisins. 10th century squires reportedly used their armor as mirrors to shave, resulting in 7,000 documented neck wounds. You snort, wipe harder. The stone slips, nicking your pinky. Blood beads bright against oxidized steel. There you are, you mutter. All that polish still sharp enough to bite. Crusaders, squires tattooed their blood into armor engravings, a creepy bonding ritual. Yours just stains the linen, another rag for the midden heap. Moonlight replaces sunlight, your candles drowned in wax tears. Polish becomes guesswork. Your fingers map grooves the way bards pluck harps, hit a wrong note, and everyone dies inside. Northern smiths etched love poems under breastplates, hidden armor valentines. This one's got a grocery list, 12 strokes per inch, the knight's obsessive rule. You do 13. Petty rebellion smells like linseed oil and pettier regret. Archaeologists found a Squire's skeleton still gripping a whetstone, its surface worn to a nub. You wonder if he died mid-task or just gave up verticality. The final plate gleams a funhouse mirror showing 10 versions of your face. None look victorious. Polishing armor after war's end is like applauding a corpse, pointless, but tradition demands it. You blow dust off the stone, watch it settle on the freshly scrubbed steel. A perfect circle. Dawn leaks through the arrow slit, gold light, revealing every scratch you missed. Squires once raced, polishing Zucchetti helmets for ale winner drank. Loser wore the sticky tankard as a hat. You chug lukewarm water instead, toast the ghost of bad decisions. The whetstone fits back in its niche, still hungry. Your palms itch with phantom grit. Some idiot theorized squires dreamed in rust particles. Your dreams are just dripping vinegar. And the knight's voice saying again. Stubborn tarnish clings between chainmail rings, the armor's version of laugh lines. You press your ear to the breastplate, half expecting a pulse. All you hear is the wind impersonating a war horn. Museum curators fight over whether to display cleaned or dirty armor, as if morality's a choice between lies and older lies. The rag disintegrates in your fist, threads clinging like spider legs. Tomorrow's problem. Tonight the armor gleams, truth sanded down to comfortable fiction. You blow out the candle, watch the shadow of your hand eclipse the polished steel. Perfect. Now no one will see the cracks. Your fingertips brush the frayed rope belt, its fibers frayed into a pale imitation of wheat stalks. 13 knots grip the greaves, each twist outliving the hands that taught you hitch-end loop shoelace patterns. Initiation belts were supposed to rot off after a year, proof your loyalty outlasted cheap hemp. This one's stubborn like a barnacle on a warship's hull. The second knot's fraying. You count 23 threads dangling like unspoken apologies. Squires once braided lovers' hair into their belts, crushing petals between the strands for good luck. Yours just smells of saddle soap and 3 failed harvest seasons. Historians still argue whether these ropes symbolized servitude or salvation, as if you can't choke on both. You tug the third knot, it holds, tight as the day you looped it around greaves, still warm from the forge. 10th century squires in Lombardy buried their belts with dead war horses. Some archaeologists dream dig site, a mouse nest, spills from the 4th knot, acorn shells clattering onto the armory floor. Nature's squatters mocking your sacred rituals. Waxy residue clings to the 5th loop beehives once guarded initiation rites, until a recruit got stung blind. They switched to pig fat after that, classic medieval problem solving. Your thumb finds the 6th knot's hidden slip knot, emergency release for when honor becomes a noose. Never used it, never needed to. The 7th knot unravels in your palm, fibers snapping like old guitar strings. Grocery lists used to be etched into belt leather. This one's just your childhood nickname in clumsy charcoal letters. Grubworm, the knight's handwriting, all elbows and spite. You rub the 8th knot against your cheek rough as his last handshake. Moonlight dissects the 9th knot into shadow-latticed secrets. Some squires drank ink to prove devotion. Their belt knots dyed black with stomach-bloodied pages. Yours stayed brown. Practical stains show weakness faster that way. The 10th knot's core holds a pebble smuggled from your village's dry creek bed. A pilgrimage in miniature. Breath steams the 11th knot's fibers. Frost pretending to be morning dew. Renaissance. Apprentices sewed pearls into their belts as hidden dowries yours, barely paid for watered ale. The 12th knot unravels as you breathe centuries of tradition dissolving into limp string. One tug would free the greaves. One tug ends the charade. Your palm hesitates, hovering over the 13th knot. Night guard squires tied theirs with a reverse twist, warding off assassins and indigestion. Superstition clings tighter than these fibers. Dawn bleeds through the window, tinting the rope the color of overripe plums. The belt creaks, a sound like someone whispering almost. Fingernails dig into the final knot, a hairline fracture beneath the grime. 37 winters have warped the fibers. Knots shrink when you're not looking. Your pulse thrums against the hemp, a thief testing a locked box. Historians would kill for this artifact, never guessing it's just a placeholder for things unsaid. The rope snaps, not with a crack, but a sigh. Greaves clatter to the floor, their teeth biting stone. No fanfare, no choir of angels, just dust motes swirling where tension once lived. You coil the belt into a loose spiral knots facing inward, like a snake digesting its own tail. Candlelight reveals your palm's new groove, a fiery crescent where the rope fought its last stand. Carthaginian squires branded their knots into their skin, permanent reminders of temporary oaths. You flex your hand, watch the welt rise, proof you held something tighter than it wanted. Footsteps echo in the hall, too light to be the castellan. You stuff the belt into the greaves, a corpse's final dressing. Young squires think loyalties about survival. Old ones know it's just the art of holding on until the rope decides you're done. Your knuckle brushes the gorget's underside a click, and the hidden panel releases like a reluctant jaw. Inside, a locket no bigger than a thumbnail, its chain fused into a silver serpent eating its own tail. Renaissance nobility loved these coiled designs, symbols of eternity for people who rarely saw 30. You pop the clasp, hinges screeching like a tea kettle's lament. The portrait's colors melted decades ago, only the smile remains. A woman's lips curved like a smuggled secret, her eyes eroded into ghostly smudges. Court painters often mixed crushed gemstones into pigments. Lapis lazuli blues richer than a king's ransom. This face was cheaper, charcoal and hope on scraped parchment. A fleck of gold lingers on her ear, maybe a lost earring or a paint flaw. You press your thumb there as if to steady her. 14th century French lovers tucked fleas into lockets, tiny bloodsuckers named after rivals for petty curses. No insects here, just the stale perfume of someone else's longing. The chain slips through your fingers, a cold whisper against your wrist. Vikings buried lockets with warriors, filled with soil from homelands they'd pillaged. This one's chain leaves a gray crescent on your skin, like a moon in morning phase. Historians still argue whether these trinkets stored poison vials or forgiveness. One side of the locket bears faint scratches, maybe a name. You tilt it toward candlelight. The letters swim into focus. Sigma Omicron Phi Eta, Greek for wisdom, or a botched engraving of Sophie. Saliva pools under your tongue. Her name dissolves before you can voice it. Some things aren't meant to survive translation. A hair snags in the locket's hinge, pale as winter sunlight. DNA analysis could trace her lineage, not that it matters now. You snap the locket shut. The click echoes louder than it should. 17th century grave robbers believed silent metal meant cursed gold. They'd ring each piece like a bell. Outside, a nightingale mimics the locket's creak. You slip the chain over your neck, cold against your collarbone. Crusaders wore saint relics in battle, polished bones, clinking with every sword swing. This hangs heavier, a drowned moon against your pulse. The gorget's compartment gapes empty as a confessional. You spit into the void, watch saliva crawl down the rusted hinges. Medieval locksmiths used spit to test metal purity. The slower the drip, the baser the alloy. Yours races downward, a coward's sprint. Candle wax drips onto the locket. You let it harden into a cloudy cataract. Venetian glassmakers taught apprentices to breathe through reeds underwater, training for gemstone engraving. Your breath fogs the silver, obscuring the smile, blurring the line between saint and stranger. Footsteps approach, boots scuffing stone in a familiar three-step limp. The castellan's hound not him, snuffles at the door. You tuck the locket under your tunic, its outline visible through threadbare linen. Tudor seamstresses sewed hidden pockets for poison vials right over the heart. Dawn glares through arrow slits. The locket warms against your chest. Egyptian nobles buried lockets filled with Nile silt so the dead wouldn't thirst. Your throat tightens dusty, but you don't reach for the water skin. Let it ache. Let it mean something. The portrait woman grins up from memory, ink teeth in a bone-white face. You carve her initial into the armory wall, a sideways sigma that becomes a crooked smile. Scaffold workers etched curses into cathedral stones, knowing their words would outlive the saints. When the castellan finally stumbles in reeking of onion wine, you're polishing the gorget's exterior. He nods at your work, never noticing the hidden panel's faint seam. His belt buckle sports a similar serpent design, tarnished, forgotten, digesting its own tail. The castellan's onion wine breath lingers long after he's gone. You scrub the stone floor with vinegar, until your fingernails bleed. Night creeps in through the arrow slit, a black tongue licking the last heat from the hearth. That's when the knock comes, 3 staccato raps that could be a woodpecker or a child's knuckles. You open the armory door just wide enough to catch the moon, and a scrawny figure clutching a folded square of parchment. Nobert, the castle's youngest stable hand, muddy boots, 2 sizes too big, and eyes darting like sparrows. Messengers were supposed to recite letters aloud back, then living recorders who'd forget the words if stabbed mid-delivery. This one thrusts the paper at you. No seal, no sigil, just creases sharp enough to draw blood. The boy's hands tremble, not from cold. You recognize the twitch your own fingers did that after the siege of Rochefort, gripping a sword too heavy for adolescent bones. Historians still argue whether the silent couriers of Burgundy used lemon juice ink or piss for secret missives. You don't sniff the page, don't care. The fire pit's embers hiss as you toss the letter in, unread. Nobert gasps, a reedy sound that almost makes you laugh. Ash curls upward, blackening into moth-wing shapes. An unpaid intern's idea of symbolism, you think, before remembering moths ate the night's best cloak in 22. Smoke stings your nostrils, parchment sweat, and desperation. That's the thing about burning words. They still leave a stench. You stamp out an ember, crawling toward Nobert's oversized boots, careful leather-like that roasts feet faster than a campfire trout. The boy flees his shadow, merging with the chapel's gloom. You watch his silhouette shrink down the corridor, one boot half lost to the dark. 13th century monks debated whether shadows had souls, arguing by lamplight, while their own stretched across parchment. Your shadow stretches too, one mangled hand feather, brushing the ceiling's cobweb chandeliers. Moth ash clings to your tunic, gray fingerprints on the locket's outline beneath. You crush one wing between thumb and forefinger. It crumbles like communion wafer. Torchlight paints the wall with your shrugging silhouette, a pantomime of indifference. Fake it till the fire dies right. Dawn licks the horizon when the armory door creaks again, this time with no knock. A single moth rests on the threshold, powder blue wings singed at the edges. Persian silk traders swore burnt moths foretold rainfall, but your mouth stays desert dry. You step over the insect, its antennae still twitching. Let the castellan find it. Let him wonder. The locket burns cold against your chest as you walk away, its chain digging a furrow below your throat. Frankish nuns wore similar chains as penance, each link a sin to outlive. Your feet carry you to the stables, not because you want to go, but because stone floors harden knees faster than prayers. Nobert's empty stall reeks of fierce wet and oat husks. You kick over his water bucket, watch liquid swallow the hoofprints. 14th century farriers added wine to horses' water, said it made them fearless in battle. The lye pools around your boots, pinkish in the rising sun. Back in the armory, the hearth's ashes have settled into a miniature delta. You crouch trace riverbeds with a dagger tip, carving tributaries that dead end at charred wood. Cartographers once burned maps they deemed too accurate, protecting trade routes from rivals' greedy fingers. Your blade etches a path to nowhere, the metal hissing as it cools. The locket's hinge bites your palm when you clutch it, a dull ache blooming beneath the scar tissue. Byzantine emperors kept venomous snakes in lockets, fangs filed to drip slow poisons. This one's fangs went blunt centuries ago, if they ever existed at all. Wind shoulders through the arrow slit, scattering ash moths across the floor. They skitter like dead leaves, like retreating armies, like apologies nobody wrote down. You leave them dancing. Dawn has other ghosts to attend. Rain seeps through the armory's cracked ceiling, each drop ringing against the helmet's crown like a tiny funeral bell. You catch one on your fingertip, watch it shimmer, before letting it roll into the visor's ice slit. Frankish knights drilled weep holes in helmets to drain blood. Not that it ever helped the dead. The downpour quickens, transforming the sallet into a steel basin. Water sluices through dents from forgotten maces, carries 30 years of patina into a murky pool. 13th century squires reportedly drank rainwater from their lord's helm for courage, a toast to inherited valor. You'd sooner lick a latrine. Droplets race down the cheek guards, tracing the same paths as the knights sweat during the siege of Vexel. Historians still argue whether that battle lasted 3 days or 4, as if an extra dawn changes the flies in the mass graves. You lean closer, your breath fogging the metal. The water's surface ripples, a phantom version of your face staring back. Something glints beneath the makeshift ocean, a fishhook scar on the helmet's interior. The knight claimed a Baltic mercenary, gave it to him, swore it was a love bite from a mermaid. Liar, you'd sewn his earlobe back on after that tavern brawl in Gdansk. Thunder groans, the sound muffled by layers of rust. Your pinky skims the water, stirs the reflections into a storm. There's a game Breton children play, dropping needles into puddles to predict suitors. You flick a rust flake instead, watch it sink like a drowned city. The pool overflows, cascading down the armor stands legs. You think of Venetian gondolas, of the knight's drunken promise to steal one for your 20th birthday. He forgot, got you a dented cooking pot instead. For when some princess needs rescuing from a soup dragon, he'd said, the joke outlived him by a decade. Lightning flashes, white sparks dancing across the waterlogged visor. For a heartbeat, it's the polished finish from your first squiring year. You blink, rust returns. Monks once claimed lightning, purified metal, forged divine weapons mid-storm. Tell that to the pitted steel weeping in your hands. A spider drifts across your miniature sea, legs splayed like a six-oared boat. You grant it safe passage with a tilted gauntlet. The castle's chaplain would call that sacrilege, a desecration of holy battlefield relics. The spider reaches the shore, scuttles into the Aventail's shadow. You press your ear to the helmet's brim, Listen to raindrops patter against the metal's memory. Someone once wrote that drowned armor rings with the voices of those it killed. All you hear is tinnitus from too many clanging drills, and maybe, faintly, the night humming that off-key shanty about a one-legged bard. Dawn leaks through the arrow slit, amber light fracturing in the water. You cup a handful, let it trickle through your fingers. Burgundian wine merchants' aged vintages in helmet crests rotted the metal for a tannic aftertaste. The puddle tastes of iron and roof thatch, no bouquet to speak of. The storm passes, leaving the helmet brimming with yesterday's ghosts. You consider overturning it, letting them spill across the floor, but your hands refuse. Better a stagnant ocean than dry rot. Better to let the dead keep their crooked reflection. Mold blooms by noon green islands dotting the water's surface. You sketch maps in the algae with a splinter of wood, trade routes for phantom armadas. The night's voice rasps in your memory. Chart your own damn course, not the echoes of mine. By dusk, the helmet's ocean evaporates into a watermark, staining the stone. You run a thumb over the outline, still damp at the edges. Ancient Carthaginians buried helmets filled with seawater to mourn drowned sailors. All you've buried is a puddle, and whatever salt your eyes can still muster. The last watermark shrivels as torchlight gutters. Your shadow lunges up the wall like a drunken giant. You adjust the sputtering rushlight in its bracket, scent of hot mutton fat stinging your nostrils. Medieval attendants used whale oil for steady flames. Lords got the good stuff, while you get this smoky dribble. Your elongated shadow mimics reaching for a sword belt that hasn't hung there in years. 13th century assassin guilds allegedly trained with shadow puppets, practicing throat slits and kidney stabs against lantern-lit walls. Yours just scratches its non-existent ass. A draft twists the flame. Your silhouette shudders, arms stretching into impossible angles. The night once mocked your spider dance drills during night watches. His own shadow would loom behind drinking companion turned phantom. You flex your fingers against the stones. Watch the giant hand engulf a carved fleur-de-lis. Thieves once hid in King Louis IX's shadow during a coup attempt, or so the troubadours croak. Yours couldn't conceal a church mouse. The wall's cold seeps into your palm rough grooves where generations of squires tallied days until knighthood. Your nails find a fresh chip in the stone dig and leave a half-moon scar. The torch pops, spitting a coal onto the flagstones. You crush it with your boothiel, a final nightly act for the night. Ash clings to your soul as you limp back. Historians still argue whether shadows were considered unlucky in French courts. Your luck ran out years before the first wrinkle. A second torch gutters out. Darkness eats the room corner by corner. Your shadow shrinks, reforming into something small and bent. Fellowship of the Snuffed Flame membership. 1. Some alchemists thought extinguished wicks captured souls mid-sentence. You wait for the night's voice in the smoke. Get only a lungful of bitterness. Moonlight slants through the arrow slit. Your shadow reappears as a sliced thing, torso cleaved from legs. You kneel to retrieve a fallen gauntlet. Watch the bisected silhouette mimic piety. Byzantine envoys once presented Charlemagne with a dagger that killed shadows, probably just a fancy cheese knife. Your knees crack as you rise, the sound echoing like a snapped lance. The shadow stretches again, head brushing the rafters. 17th century stagehands used stretched oxhide silhouettes to simulate giants in morality plays. Yours needs no costume. Grief pads the proportions. The remaining torch drowns in its own wax, light leaching from amber to umber. Your shadow melts into the wall's cracks, a stain with delusions of grandeur. You trace its outline with a charcoal stub, lopsided crown, and all. The night watch's recipe for black ink included soot, egg whites, and allegedly the dreams of scribes. Darkness claims the last torch. Your shadow dissolves, but the afterimage lingers, blotting out constellations in the drafty void. You inhale slowly, taste iron and failure. They say Joan of Arc's pyre cast shadows that burned for 3 nights. Yours barely survives a cough. When dawn finally leaks through the barred windows, your shadow creeps back at proper scale. It trails you to the armor stand, hunched and familiar, until you turn suddenly. The silhouette freezes, caught mid-reach toward the knight's absent sword. Sunlight sharpens the edges, trimming your shadow to a squire's honest proportions. You shift the whetstone in your belt. Watch the silhouette mirror the motion. No giant now, no phantom limbs, just a man shaped by absence. The armory cat slinks past, tail merging with your shadow's ankle. For a breath, you're chained to something warm and feral. Then it's gone, paw prints stitching across dusty sunbeams. A convent in Marseille bred cats to chase shadow mice drawn on walls, wasted 6 decades before declaring it heresy. By noon, your shadow hides beneath your boots, a puddle of spent ambition. You kick a rust flake, watch the dark shape ripple. Italian duelists practiced shadowless stance at high noon to blind opponents. Your opponent's a helmet full of cobwebs, already winning. The armory's great door creaks open, a servant girl delivering gruel. Your shadow stretches toward the sunlight behind her yearning puppet. She avoids stepping on it, superstition or courtesy. You don't ask. Her own shadow is a smudge ink spilled on parchment. Dusk returns, torches relit, your doppelganger back on its wall throne. It mocks your incompetence with a grease stain, stretches when you fetch rags, shrinks as you scrub. Some Kabbalists believed shadows held the body's unwashed sins. Yours reeks of sweat and nostalgia. You blow out the final torch yourself, stealing the shadow's kingdom. Blind fingers find the night's old cot, sagging ropes, and mildewed straw. They say Edward, the Black Prince, slept in full armor, turned himself into a human casket. You sprawl barehanded, palms up, collecting motes of whatever light remains. The moon climbs. Blue-gray silhouettes of rats patrol the floorboards. Your shadow stirs, born anew as lunar bleach on stone. It cradles an empty wineskin, mimics drinking, tips nothing into its gaping mouth. A perfect replica of your 20th birthday. Hours bleed, your shadow pales as clouds smother the moon. You close your eyes, feel its outline dissolve across your lids. Mongol sentries, allegedly gauged time by their shadows, climb up fortress walls. Yours just circles like a trapped thing, biting its tail. First birdsong trickles through the arrow slit. Your shadow stretches east, yawns, becomes ordinary again. You lace your boots with stiff fingers, watch the silhouette's hands fumble. No giants here, no laughing echoes, just a squire and his stain waiting for the sun to finish the job. The chapel bells start mid-yawn, their bronze throats vibrating the rust off your molars. 16th century founders added silver to bell metal for a purer lament. Tonight it just sounds like a drunkard banging cookware. You count each strike 10, 11, 12, waiting for the 13th that never comes. Time's a penniless debtor, here, always shorting you one clang. Cold seeps through your knee patches as you kneel arranging greaves in their funeral row. Dawn filters through arrow slits, slicing the dust into leaning pyramids. Your breath fogs a gauntlet's knuckle brief constellation on tarnished stars. Monks in Avignon rehearsed bell patterns with wooden spoons, their midnight clatter mistaken for skeletal applause. A sparrow flits into the rafters, drops a twig onto the salad helmet. The plink echoes like a coin in a leper's cup. You resist the urge to lob a gauntlet at it, honor's last hiccup. Historians still argue whether retreat bells signaled rest or just a prettier word for surrender. The debate scratches at your ribs, a mouse in the wainscoting of resolve. Your shadow creeps toward the door, stretching like dough under a rolling pin. 3 years ago, you'd be sprinting toward the stables, buckles half fastened, spitting out armor polish. Now the morning yawn hangs unbuttoned. You press a pauldron to your nose, inhale the ghost of lemongrass oil and panic sweat. Crusaders imported citrus cleansers from Jerusalem, never mentioned the stench of dysentery that came with. The Armory cat saunters past, trailing a spiderweb from its whiskers. You flick the cobweb away, watch it catch light like a beggar's silk. Its shadow tangles with yours, a brief pantomime of camaraderie. Venetian glassmakers kept felines to combat mirror-dwelling spirits. Your mouser just battles historical delusions. A loose chainmail link rolls under your boot, crunch of black sugar under heel. You pocket it, another meaningless trophy. Dawn's rhombus of light inches across the floor guillotine for dust motes. Your thumbs trace the kill count notched into a vambrace, 19 ticks in crooked lines. Louvre archivists found similar tallies on a Templar's armor, paired with doodles of angry sheep. The final bell tremor fades, leaving your ears full of wool. You peel a wax seal off the dirt floor, St. Christopher's face smooshed into a leer. Medieval pilgrims wore melted seals as healing amulets. Yours just embarrasses the saint. The beeswax snaps clean half a halo left in your palm. Wind shoulders through the arrow slit, scattering your pile of belt rivets. You chase them like a child after runaway lentils. One rolls into a crack, vanishes into the castle's endless maw. Norman builders buried live falcons in foundation stones for luck. Their shrieks supposedly hardened the mortar. You wonder if they still scream beneath your knees. Sunlight hits the nights, bever firing a sunbeam into your left eye. You shield your face, catch the light in your palm, a captured firefly, forged in Toledo, tempered in cowardice, polished in hindsight. A playhouse in Cordoba once rigged armor to shoot light beams during passion plays, burned down during the resurrection scene. Your stomach growls, a bear cub in a cathedral. The sound bounces off breastplates, mockery in 5-part harmony. You press a closed fist below your ribs, silence through suffocation. Apothecaries prescribed armor ingestion for hollow chest, ate the latch off a brigandine at 17, still queasy at sunrise. Sweat slides down your spine, improvised penance for sins you didn't commit. The air tastes of wet linen and unresolved arguments. You press a coif to your cheek, its rusted mesh printing diamonds on your skin. Royal surgeons used chainmail to suture battlefield wounds, left more scars than the swords did. A serving girl crosses the yard, her shadow flirtatious against the well. Your breath fogs the nearest arrow slit, blurring her into a watercolor rumor. She slips behind the dovecote, swallowed by the zealous light. Doves erupt, wing beats syncing with your pulse. Hungarian pigeon handlers trained birds to recognize armor crests. Feathered couriers pecking at blood-stained tauberts. The noon bell doesn't come. Someone's sleeping off last night's mead. You trace a hex sign etched inside the shield talisman against Balkan wolf demons. The knight scoffed, called it illiterate scratching, but never ordered it stripped. Archaeologists found identical marks on Saladin's captured artillery. Nobody admits he feared moonbiters. Fatigue hits like a wet sandbag. You slump against the shield rack, wooden pegs denting your shoulder blades. A spider descends, silk thread glinting like an assassin's rope. You let it swing, tiny pendulum between duty and nap. Bulgarian mercenaries sewed live spiders into their cloaks for fortune S8. Most died of bites before battle. Your shadow shrinks to a puddle around your boots. Crime scene outline drawn in noon. The Squire-shaped stain lacks your slouch, judgmental in its perfect posture. You spit between its feet, watch the dark blotch bloom. They said rain followed a squire's spit. Harvests drown 3 counties over. When the armory doors creak open, you don't turn. Let the guest mistake you for a half-rusted statue. Footsteps pause, coins clink into a gauntlet's palm. Charity clatters like a beggar's applause. You'll spend it on resin for the lance rack, or maybe apricot brandy. Frankish kings distributed notched coins to mark undeserved alms yours, just buys tomorrow's mistake. Dusk arrives early, a sneak thief lugging shadows across the floor. You strike flint, watch sparks cascade into the torch trough. Flame licks the oil brief carnival, lighting the dented steel. Dutch painters used polished cuirasses as mirrors for self-portraits, vanity reflected in war's discarded skin. The final torch gutters its death rattle, echoing in the breastplate. Your shadow flees the scene, leaving you alone with the artifacts of absence. Dawn's a relentless creditor, but night still lets you kneel here, counting silence between bells. Morning light licks the thistle sprouts crawling through flagstones, green sabers breaching a castle's stale breath. You snap one at the stem, its prickers cling like beggar children. Medieval masons stuffed time in floor crevices to ward off plague miasma. These weeds are less polite. The horsehair plume lies limp across your lap, its one sprout arch flattened by decades of storage. You knot a thistle into its braid, crude barbs snagging the strands. A 14th century Persian manual suggested dandelion sap for polishing plumes. Nobody mentioned hostile horticulture. Your fingers bleed microscopic rebellions. Dust motes swirl where you yanked the weed, tiny galaxies fleeing an amateur god. 3 more thistles crack through nearby, their stalks bent like archers' bows under tension. You pluck them, twist their sinewy necks into the plume's spine. Historians still argue whether squires wove charms into their lords' regalia, or just improvised with whatever survived winter. The half-braided monstrosity resembles a drunk hedgehog. You snort, startle a mouse chewing on discarded gauntlet lining. It stares, beady eyes judging your craftsmanship. Make your own folly, you mutter, tossing a thistle head at its paws. Frankish stable boys allegedly slept on thistle mattresses to harden their resolve. Mostly, they just cursed louder. Sun warms the back of your neck, an apology for yesterday's frost. The plume's shadow on the wall looks like a knight mid-sneeze. You add a burr cluster, crude mace substitute. Burgundian tournament crowds through dried thistles at unimpressive jousters, florid humiliation. A thorn pierces your thumbnail, blood swells like wine from a punctured skin. You suck the wound, taste iron and dirt and pettiness. The plume now sports uneven greenery, nature's middle finger to military precision. Your shadow copies the motion, braiding nothing into nothing. Wind sneaks through the arrow slit, tugging at your botany project. The thistles rasp against each other, whispering gossip in vegetable tongues. You anchor the plume under a chainmail coif, let the breeze pluck discordant notes. Carthaginian scouts used thistle down as tinder, never recorded how often it burned their maps. The mouse returns, dragging a shredded tabard scrap. You flick a burr at its haul, watch the debris tangle into a nest. Your laugh echoes off the lance racks, startlingly young in this ossuary of old wars. Noon bleaches the colors from your thistle plume, turning it into a skeletal hand. You prop it on the sallet helmet, crooked crown of a disgraced king. Muttering voices approach the armory door you freeze mid-reach. Let them glimpse this absurdity. Rumors need fertilizer. Silence returns. The mouse's nest trembles new life in a dead man's livery. You spit on the flagstones. No rain comes, just a transient dark star. Dutch painters used thistledown to varnish canvases, tiny spines catching the light of fake suns. Your stomach growls. The thistles look briefly edible. You snap another stalk. Milk oozes from the wound. Byzantine field medics use the sap to glue arrow wounds shut, a sting worse than piety. Shadows stretch their afternoon legs. The plume's scattered seeds stick to your tunic, future invaders in miniature. You sweep them into a gauntlet, shake the contents out the arrow slit. They catch the wind parachutes, heading east toward the compost heap of history. Damp rises through the stones, your knees imprinting temporary fossils. The braided thistle plume now hosts a spider, eight-legged squatter claiming Squire's work. You let it stay. Every relic needs its caretaker. A Provençal troubadour song claims spiders, wove Charlemagne's battle standards, total fabrication. But history's just organized mildew. When the chapel bell tolls, a single thistle seed drifts back inside. It lands in the helmet's visor, cradled by rust. You close one eye, peer through the slit, watch the seed blur into a distant army on the horizon. The visor's slit narrows your world to a razor-cut horizon. The thistle seed blurs into marching shadows. You lower the helmet. Its weight still surprises you after all these years. The cuirass lies gutted on the floor, empty as a liar's promise. Kneeling feels like penance, cold stone biting through worn trousers. You press your ear to the breastplate's chill curve, grainy rust prickling skin. Medieval armorers stamped prayers inside breastplates, hexagonal patterns to split arrowheads. No holy geometries here, just a maker's mark shaped like a drunkard's stumble. Silence first, then your own pulse echoes through the metal. A drip from the ceiling hits the pauldron, plink, plink, plink. You hold breath, listen harder. 17th century mercenaries swore they heard dead men's whispers in salvaged armor nonsense. But your neck hairs rise anyway. 3 heartbeats pass. 4. The drip sinks with your eyelids, flutter. Historians still argue whether battle-dented armor retained memories, or just made good echo chambers for lonely fools. A spider descends on its thread, dances across the visor's edge. Your cheek sticks to the metal, peeling free, with a sound like parchment tearing. Dawn's first light stripes the greaves, banishing the ghost chimes you almost heard. Tudor Squire's oiled armor with walnut juice left nutty musk in the joints. You catch a whiff of linseed and long dead sweat. No walnuts here. Standing cracks your knees like a percussion section. The cuirass winks, one last sunbeam in its dents. You heft it lighter than when you first buckled him into it. Frankish blacksmiths allegedly slept in their creations to understand their souls. Bullshit. But you get the urge. Footsteps echo in the corridor. You freeze, cuirass hovering midair. Let them find you hugging a hollow man. The steps fade, you exhale, metal clanks against your ribs. Constantinople's guards wore silk under armor to stop chafing. You've got burlap and regret. A fly buzzes into the breastplate, homesick Icarus, seeking a tin sky. You watch it ricochet, drunken pilot in a metal storm. Smartest creature here, you mutter, tipping the cuirass to free it. Moonlight replaces sun. The armor's shadows stretch into grotesques on the wall. Your back at its side, ear pressed like a child at a seashell. 8 heartbeats. 12. Iron warms slightly from your skin, a mockery of living heat. They taught you armor's purpose was deflection, not containment. Yet here you are trying to trap echoes in a metal lung. Your breath fogs the steel brief Rorschach blooms. Flemish squires used to exhale Lorelei songs into helms. Their lords never noticed the misty lyrics. Distant chapel bells prime sext none. Just the cistern's drip and your stubborn oracle. The spider rebuilds its web between the cuirass and a discarded mace. You consider stealing its silk, repair the knight's frayed surcoat. But thievery feels too alive for this tomb. When the armory door groans at last, you don't lift your head. Let the intruder see your vigil, a still life of devotion and dementia. The mouse from yesterday scurries over your boot, drags a seed into the breastplate's shadow. Night fades, the cuirass exhales nothing you can prove. You rise, bones popping like a ship's rigging, and lean the armor against the cobwebbed wall. It slumps, an empty hostage. You pocket the thistle seed from the visor, one more relic for the pyre. Cold lingers in your ear, phantom limb of the ghost you chased. Dawn's choir of sparrows mocks your metal communion. You blow dust off the breastplate, watch it swirl like a soul made visible. Historians still argue whether plate armor ever saved more men than it doomed. The fly returns lands where your skull pressed the steel and cleans its wings in the warmth you left behind. Your thumbnail finds the groove under the gorget, that telltale ridge he showed you once when wine loosened his tongue. A click, the hidden panel springs open with a puff of stale air. Empty, just powder-fine dust clinging to your fingertip, last remnants of what reeked of apricots and regret during long campaigns. European knights hollowed out gorgets for saintly relics, fragments of bone or locks of martyr hair. Your dead knight stored brandy, the cheap stuff, always pretending piety when caught. You sniff the compartment. Decades later, it still stings your nostrils with phantom burn. A mouse skull winks from the dust, tiny as a thumbnail. Archaeologists found mole teeth in Henry V's cousin's greaves. Superstition or pest problem. You flick it aside, watch it roll into a crevice. Another artifact for future fools to misinterpret. Emergency reserves. He'd rasp during night watches, tapping the gorget's secret belly. His breath reeked of juniper berries and bad decisions. You mimic the gesture now, knuckles brushing cold steel, echoing his theater of invincibility. The flask would have tarnished by now anyway. 17th century dueling pistols used booze compartments. Dutch traders sold hydration flasks shaped like Bibles. yours father's. Whoever's this was held liquid desperation instead of scripture, wiping dust on your thigh. You imagine archivists' centuries, hence debating this hollow. Historians still argue whether hidden armor niches stored anti-plague vinegar or contingency poison. You know better. It's where cowards stash courage by the ounce. A fingernail of wax clings to the panel's hinge, crimson ceiling, dribble from some midnight letter. You pick at it, half hoping for a revelation, half fearing the gibberish truth might hold. Elizabethan squires used candle wax to plug armor's chinks, fragile armor for fragile men. Dawn slants through the armory's arrow loops. Your dust smear glows like powdered gold. Alchemists claimed metal filings could turn wine into gold. Your night just turned gold into piss. The panel snaps, shut sound, reverberating through quizzes and guilt. You press your tongue to the gorget's edge, taste centuries of tarnish and lies. Iron, blood's metallic cousin, offers no answers. Mongol horsemen drank from their enemies' helmets, victory ale served in a skull cup. You choke before admitting how often you've considered it. The compartment mocks you, its emptiness more honest than any vintage. Crusaders returned with flasks full of Jordan River water, mostly Venetian vodka. How many holy lies fit in a thimble? Your boot nudges the mouse skull, sends it skittering into shadows. You'll leave it for the next wide-eyed squire. Let them invent noble purposes for dead men's storage. Dust motes swirl where the brandy fumes once lingered, dancing on air he'll never breathe again. The empty flask rolls from your lap, clattering across flagstones worn smooth by centuries of armored feet. You rise, Boothiel striking stone with that familiar click he drilled into you, 1, 2, 1, 2, until your shins ached. The rhythm bounces off vaulted ceilings, echoes multiplying like phantom squires marching behind. 16th century castle staircases spiraled clockwise to disadvantage left-handed attackers. Your cadence would have pleased those long-dead architects. Heel strikes timed to their murderous geometry. Yet your reflection in a discarded breastplate betrays you shoulders, rounded where his stayed broad, drag in your step where his strode. A cobweb clings to your earlobe. You swat it away. Watch it float toward rafters. They're ribbed like the ceilings of St. Bridget's Chapel, where he made you kneel for 3 hours after dropping his shield. The memory twitches your left eyelid muscle, remembering what your mind wishes it'd forget. Your next step falters. The click dies mid-strike. Archaeologists found boots preserved in Norwegian bogs, stitched with love poems in runes. Yours just grinds pebbles into dust, unromantic, unheroic. You pivot, testing the hesitation heel, rasping like a whetstone on dull metal. Dust motes swirl where your shadow slices torchlight. Historians still argue whether castle echoing halls amplified intimidation or reminded lords of their own emptiness. You cough, the sound ricochets, mocking your feeble attempt at his thunderous resonance. 3 paces, the rhythm almost recovers. Then your toe catches a rusted chain link, sending it skittering. 14th century squires practiced marching with ankle weights, sandbags, leather strapped to simulate mail. You're tethered by lighter chains, habit guilt. How he'd smirk, seeing you mimic his limp. Sunlight bleeds through a high arrow slit. Your halved shadow stretches across a tapestry of mold. The scene depicts St. Maurice spearing a dragon, fabric frayed, where the knight's face should be. Your boot grinds the chain link into the stone metal, screeching like a wounded hare. You freeze, ear cocked to the dying vibration. Every armory has its secret harmonies, creaks and groans layered like choir parts. In Krakow's Armory Museum, they whisper the rafters still hum with forgotten drill chants. Your inhale shakes, off-key, a novice butchering a hymn. The echo resumes when you move weaker now. You count steps like prayer beads. 11, 12, 13. Napoleon's grognards could march 30 miles in hobnailed boots without blistering. Your calluses have softened souls, pampered by straw and self-pity. A spider dangles from your collar, fleeing the dissonance. You let it descend onto a pauldron. Watch 8 legs tap dance across engraved laurels. It's better at impersonating purpose than you'll ever be. Your shadow reaches the armory door before you do, stretched thin as vellum. It hesitates on the threshold, wavering, until you kick the iron-banded wood shut. The thud lacks his signature flourish, the follow-through that shook every hinge in the compound. You lean against cold stone palms, flat, like you're steadying the walls themselves. Restorationists found goose grease smeared on Winchester Castle stones. Some whispered it quieted weeping ghosts. All you smell is your own sour sweat, lactic acid, and borrowed mannerisms. The final step comes unbidden, heel striking with force enough to bruise bone. The clack pierces the dust, sharp as a blacksmith's hammer. For one fractured moment, it's his step, his tempo, his arrogance carved into the air. Then silence floods back, carrying the scent of oil and mildew. Your little echo drowns in it, gone before you unclench your jaw. Polish knights buried their boots with them, symbolic walk into the afterlife. Yours will outlive you, soles barely scratched, treading circles in an armory, going nowhere. The letters stick to your fingers, cracked wax crumbling like dried blood. 16 of them, one for each summer you spent buckling his cuirass. The parchment smells of lie and reluctant confessions, ink fading to match your resolve. Medieval scribes used oak galls for black ink, turning tree tumors into permanence. These words bleed brown at the edges, as if the paper itself regrets holding them. Your thumbnail traces the broken seal, a lion's head, now eyeless and vague. A draft lifts the topmost page, fluttering like a wounded swallow. You catch it midair, smearing a dearest into dirtiest. Historians still argue whether squires were taught letters or just weapon counts. The smudge answers for you, clumsy strokes mirroring your first halting sword thrusts. The fireplace yawns, cold ash from last night's ledger burning, still clotting the grate. Addresses curl their two names of castellans and cousins eaten by flame. You press a thumb to the soot, transfer the blackness to the blank parchment's corner, an improvised mourning band, wider than any lord ever wore. Your knife splits the driest letter lengthwise, steel hissing through apologies meant for a sister who died in childbirth. 13th century, nuns devised triangular letter, folds to deter prying eyes. Your creases are haphazard, wings bent by hands better suited to sharpening blades than soothing words. Each crane takes shape, beaks pointed toward the rafters, where owl droppings crust the beams. One per year of service, a flock grounded by your indecision. A scrap catches mid-fold your faithful servant, crumpled into an accordion belly. In Norwich, a clerk once wrote a pardon on bacon rind, greasy absolution. These are leaner scriptures, starved of closure. You balance the first bird on a crossbeam. It lists left, like the night, after that Saracen arrow found his hip. The 12th letter resists, parchment thickened by a wine stain from that disastrous diplomatic feast. Your fingers remember the way he gestured with a goblet, dousing the squire's table while declaring peace terms absurd. The crane's wings droop, soggy with memory. Light bleeds through a crack in the shutters, slicing the armory into light and darker light. You count crane shadows, 16 ghosts nailed to a sundial that only measures regret. A bead of wax plops onto your wrist, impromptu amber, trapping no useful truth. Your breath billows a crane's paper chest, brief inflation before it sags. 14th century surgeons believed air could heal wounds if blown into helmets. These lungs only recycle the same stale doubts, infection without remedy. 3 letters bear your own name, blotted out and rewritten until the fibers tore. The last E dangles by a thread, a hanged man kicking at emptiness. You tuck it into the smallest crane, swaddle the ink-blurred runt like a stillborn confession. Mice skitter behind the walls, their claws scritching a counterpoint to your folding. Scholars found love notes in medieval rat nests, shredded romances lining rodent cradles. These cranes will know softer teeth if they're gnawed at all. You climb onto the trestle table, boot prints overlapping the night from that final argument. A crane tumbles from your grip, spiraling until the floor claims it. The landing lacks grace, a drunkard's swan dive into mud. The rafters smell of sodden thatch and swallow droppings. You wedge a crane into a crack where mortar surrendered centuries ago. It lists like a galley in a storm, paper sail, catching no wind. Below, your shadow mimes the motion, arm outstretched in perpetuity. One parchment remains, the ink still glistening with this morning's failed attempt. It begins to the honorable and ends with a knife slit through the quill's last gasp. You fold it precisely, sharp corners meant to cut whoever discovers it. The armory door groans, a servant girl dragging in fresh rushes. Your cranes shiver in the sudden draft, beaks clicking like telegrams from the dead. She doesn't look up, the living rarely notice paper graves. You step down from the table, knee popping like a wet branch in winter. 14 cranes remain airborne, too lost to clumsiness or providence. Tomorrow's sun will warp their wings, curling the yours faithfully into question marks. Dying embers winked in the hearth, you press a palm to the cold stones where ledgers burned. Charcoal dust stripes your skin, a prisoner's tally, with no jailer left to report to. Your boot crushes the fallen crane, grinding forgiveness into the grooves between flagstones. When the girl leaves, you pocket the wreckage, paper pulp clinging to your knuckles. 16th century ink recipes included crushed emeralds for nobility. All you carry home is ash and the weight of wings too timid to fly. The helmet's hollow yawns upward, a steel mouth frozen mid-laugh. You drop a breadcrumb into its visor slit, a meager tithe for old hungers. Armories once doubled as banquet halls during sieges. Your fingers brush a sticky patch where spiced wine seeped into oak planks a lifetime ago. The memory hums, lute strings and bone-handled knives scoring the table in equal measure. Your meal fits in one palm, rye crust brittle as papal pardons, the apple half bruised from riding double with a whetstone. 9th century feasts featured roasted peacock sewn back into its plumage, grand delusions held together with threads. This feast's pomp lies in the absence of a herald announcing its poverty. The bread shatters between your teeth, more splinter than sustenance. Historians still argue whether medieval kitchens used dried cod or mutton for royal mock venison. You masticate the mystery, your jaws cricking like a drawbridge chain. Across the room, the knight's shield hangs askew, dented, where a trebuchet stone glanced off during that ill-fated Italian campaign. A greasy thumbprint stains its center your own, from the day you oiled it, with hands still shaking after your first kill. 3 mice convene beneath the table, a furry parliament debating your crumbs. You flick an apple, seed their way. It skitters past the helmet's shadow. They scatter tiny claws ticking against flagstones, where spilled ale once drowned a duke's embarrassment. 13th century cooks sometimes baked live birds into pies for noble amusement. Your vermin cohorts lack such theatricality, pragmatists in a post-pageantry world. The helmet's crumb-trapped visor gapes. You imagine it lecturing on proper table manners. Elbows off the battlefield. It might rasp, voice rusted and moralizing. You rip another bread chunk, send it tumbling into the dark, where the knight's left eyebrow should be, a communion of one, wafers descending into armored purgatory. Wind shoulders through a loose shutter, stirring dust into soups on thin broth. You raise the apple core in mocking toast, inhale vinegar-scented decay. Medieval brewers believed fruit sap could sober drunkards. The smell alone curdles your resolve, sour as unbottled confessions. Silverfish scatter when you shift on the bench, their armor shinier than your own has been in years. The wood groans, an echo of the steward who once pinched your cheek. here for stealing honeyed figs. His ghost haunts the splinters, disapproving of how thoroughly you've outlived him. Crumb by crumb, you rebuild the Battle of Brenneburg on the tabletop. Rye infantry faces apple cavalry, a pearwood spoon commanding the left flank. Marshalling troops was easier when your biggest concern was keeping his sword belt oiled. The squire's knot at your waist itches, unraveling without permission or purpose. Light bleeds through arrow loops, striping the helmet's forehead like war paint. You lick apple pith from your thumb, tartness flooding the ghost taste of venison stew. A servant once dropped a cauldron of it here, searing his foot through to the bone. The stain outlived him, a savory shroud now hosting your crumbs. The last morsel clings to your tunic, a stubborn squire clinging to a doomed charge. You surrender it to the helmet's maw, watch darkness swallow what daylight couldn't. Somewhere beyond these walls, real feasts persist. Scribes write menus on vellum, chickens gilded with saffron knives, sharpened solely for slicing illusion. Your bench creaks as you rise, knee cartilage grinding like peppermills. A lone crumb clings to the table's edge, defiant, a sickly king refusing abdication. You leave it be, lest history accuse you of gluttony. The helmet's grin seems wider now, cheek guards casting shadow teeth across the floor. You salute it, 2 fingers to brow, a general acknowledging his last loyal soldier. When you blow out the candle, the dark swallows the banquet whole. The mail sleeve sprawls across your lap, a metallic serpent shedding scales. Each rusted ring parts with reluctance, a warrior's reluctant confession. 13th century smiths swore goat urine polished chainmail best, though you'd sooner lick a battlefield than test that theory. Your pliers creak, a mouse's death rattle in miniature. 1 link snaps free, tossed into a clay bowl with 13 others. The sound echoes through the armory's ribs, a lock disintegrating teeth. First, historians still argue whether squires or smiths bore responsibility for mail repairs. You side with the dead. Let their silence absorb the blame. Another ring fractures, green corrosion, dusting your tunic L-I-K, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Japanese letter, Japanese letter, Japanese letter, Japanese letter, Chinese letter. Your thumb finds the hidden dent. The knight took a mace here at Chalons. Or was it Poitiers? Geography blurs when all battlefields share the same metallic aftertaste. A 1427 manuscript claims French knights buried their mail in dung heaps to prevent rust. You briefly consider the courtyard midden, discard the notion with the next broken link. 3 rings cling in a lover's, embrace their corrosion, a perverse weld. You twist, feel the give, a vertebrae separating. Someone once told you Venetian courtesans wore dismantled mail as jewelry, trophies from favored clients. The story reeks of tavern embellishment, but you picture them now, giggling as they pocket these very rings. Light leaks through the armory's high windows, slashing your hands into checkerboard patterns. Each shadow square pried apart, resembles those illuminated manuscripts where demons devour their own tales. Your pliers slip, etch a crescent moon into your palm. Blood beads, 13 droplets, mirroring the bowl's meager haul. A breeze riffles through the broken links, humming a tuneless dirge. Chainmill's true name, hauberk, sounds like something a drunkard might retch into a guardrobe. You prefer its old French roots. Halsberge, throat protector. How many screams these rings stifled, now muting your breath instead. The bowl overflows, its contents resembling a blacksmith's rejected constellation. Archaeologists found a melted male coif in Pompeii's ruins last century. Volcanic heat fusing rings into metallic lace. You press a palm against your half-disassembled sleeve, wonder what future fools will make of this purposeful undoing. Your knuckle brushes a still intact section, cold as a widow's wedding band. 9th century Persian manuals advised soaking mail in vinegar and barley flour. You'd rather drink the mixture, sour courage for sourer work. Another link fractures, 9 more years deleted from the timeline. The bishop's blessing etched inside one ring flakes away, Latin devolving into nonsense. In nomen patri becomes nomad patron, becomes rotten apron. Sacred words always unravel faster than profane ones. Your spine hunches, vertebrae mimicking the curved links in your lap. Mouse droppings pepper the workbench. The rodents clearly favor scripture-free feasts. You brush them aside. A reverse miracle, 5 loaves and no fishes. The remaining sleeve dangles like a flayed limb, its butchered edges winking in thin light. Twilight sluices through arrow loops, turning each severed ring into a pyrite sun. Your pliers hesitate at a stubborn joint, its rust brighter than the others. Orange flakes drift downward, iron snow in a seasonless room. Some armories hung mail near hearths to keep metal supple. You trade 7 years of life for a single breath of wood smoke. The last link surrenders without drama, a retired sentry shrugging off his post. Bowl now brimming, you weigh it in both hands. 42 rings, 42 winters, 42 opportunities to die with your boots off. Wind sneaks through a crack, scattering 3 links across flagstones. You let them flee, tiny fugitives racing toward rat holes. Their clattering footsteps fade, children escaping a ruined schoolhouse. The bowl's remaining contents stare up accusing. Coins for Karen, if the ferryman accepted debased currency. From the shadows, the helmet watches. Its gaze weighs the worth of your labor, calculating armor's half-life. You twist the empty sleeve into a spiral, lay it beside the bowl like a spent chrysalis. Some moths refuse to fly, even after shedding their cages. Your fingertips find the workbench's oldest stain, wine dark and defiant. Tomorrow's problem. Tonight, the bowl sits heavy, a beggar's alms collected in reverse. Blowing out the candle feels like mercy, darkness, swallowing the arithmetic of decay. Dawn fillets the armory, through arrow slits your candle long dead. The shield leans against the hearth, wine stains, mapping continents the castle's scribes never recorded. You press a damp rag to its surface, 15 years of spilled vintages blurring into a drunken cartographer's masterpiece. 3 distinct blotches dominate: burgundy highlands, garnet valleys, a splash of claret where the ocean might be. Someone once told you Portuguese navigators used port wine to waterproof their charts. You smear a droplet sideways, extending the coastline past the shield's dented rim. Your fingernail traces a fissure splitting the kingdom. In half, papal bulls and treaties carved the real world this way. Historians still argue whether the 1494 Treaty of Tordesillas was divine arrogance or pragmatic theft. You rename the crack-broken Promise Strait, scratched with a rusted clasp. A mouse darting across the stones pauses to sniff your creation. Behold, you mutter, Sir Rodentius, first citizen of Vineland. It nibbles a raisin you dropped yesterday, rejecting diplomacy for breakfast. The shield's back tells a darker tale: charred patches where Greek fire clung during the Antioch siege. Heat warped the wood grain into topographic ridges. 9th century Baghdad scholars believed maps should be carved on cooled lava for accuracy. You run your palm over the blisters, memorizing mountains that never were. A white stain disrupts the eastern frontier, chalky residue from the knight's failed attempt to clean blood with milk. Medieval alchemists swore dairy neutralized violence's taint. You lick your thumb, scrub at the splotch, watch it bloom into a ghostly island chain. Here be taverns, you announce to the rafters. A spiderweb trembles, its architect long devoured. Your rag snags on the shield's central boss, a dragon's head eaten by rust. Its remaining eye holds a shard of quartz, dull now, plucked from a Welsh riverbed decades back. Lunch is half a wheel of cheese and regret. You bite a peninsula into the wedge, establish tasty colonies along the southern coast. Crumbs become nomadic tribes, migrating toward a honey-pot mecca. The mouse approves, blessing your edible empire with nibbled borders. A wine flask's dregs help repurpose a moth hole as Pirates' Cove. Stories claim Baltic privateers hid maps in their beards, knotted navigation charts into facial hair. You stroke your stubble, wonder if the night ever smuggled secrets this way. The itch suggests no. Shadow Alps form where armor polish congealed, gray peaks taller than the Armory's highest tower. Renaissance mapmakers invented mountain symbols to cover areas they were too lazy to detail. You etch a pass through the range, a wandering line leading nowhere. By dusk, your fingers are stained like a scribe's, purple fingerprints colonizing the shield's edges. The real work begins when torchlight gilds the surface, turning Rorschach blots into empires. You discover a lakeside village where the knight once vomited after his first joust. Rename it Triumph Bay. 3 knocks startle you, wind, not visitors. The shield slips, its weathered edge clipping your shin. Defensive wounds. You grunt, rubbing the bruise blooming like an unfurled banner. How many battles did this wood deflect? The shield outlived its purpose, became a cutting board, a shelf. Now this. An old maxim whispers through cracked lips. Maps are verbs, not nouns. You spit on the northern tundra, watch saliva dilute the wine-dark sea. Geography. Books claim the Thames once froze so thick they roasted oxen on the ice. You doubt they basted with spit and spite. Night falls, the shield's contours flatten into a dark mirror. Your reflection wavers, younger face overlaid with phantom borders. A gash across your brow becomes the perfectly incorrect meridian. Historians forgive drunk cartographers faster than sober ones. Maybe mistakes need no forgiveness. You drag a gauntlet finger through dust, chart a fresh river along the shield's spine. Its course wobbles truth disguised as intention. Buried Roman roads followed fox paths, civilization trailing wildness. Your river ends abruptly at a dent Niagara of the disillusioned. The mouse returns, leaving tiny paw prints along the western coast. You appoint it royal surveyor. It defecates on the Capitol. Cool air rising from the flagstones carries the scent of yeast, a forgotten ale cask sweating somewhere. 14th century monks brewed beer to drink while copying maps. Claimed hops helped straighten longitude lines. You inhale deeply. Your own meridians remain splendidly crooked. As constellations pierce the armory's gloom, you whisper revised coordinates, trading measured leagues for whim. That turpentine splatter, dragon mating grounds, the arrowhead groove, valley of unanswered letters. When dawn returns, you'll forget these names, the shield already forgetting you. One last stain awaits, a thumbprint of blackberry preserves from a summer ago. You press your own thumb against it, kingdoms merging under shared mess. Tomorrow's polishing will erase everything. Tonight, you rule an empire of stains, a child smearing borders in the dark. The chapel bell shivers the night air, one iron note for each ghost hour. You hunch on a half-collapsed sarcophagus, knees bumping the armor bundle in your lap. Linen wrappings whisper with every shift, a burial shroud learning its purpose. 10 strikes. 11. 12. Your breath steams the visor's eye-slit, a temporary ghost haunting the helmet. Paris once banned night burials during the Black Death. Too many mourners, vanishing into mass graves. You tighten the rope around the breastplate, feel its ribs press into your thigh. Midnight dew soaks through your hose. Some fool claimed English knights buried in full armor rose faster during Judgment Day. You snort, shift, weight onto a lichen-stained angel's wing. The cuisses clank, waking a nesting thrush. Its alarm call mocks your vigil. Moonlight glints on the gorget's edge, a silver smile in the dark. 17th century grave, robbers wrote memoirs about armor whispers, said cursed mail could name its killers. You press a thumb against cold steel. It offers only silence and rust. 3 veiled figures pass the cemetery gate, their lantern bobbing like a low-held star. You stiffen, fingers curling around the sword belt, rolled inside the bundle. They turn down almsman's alley toward warmer ghosts. The chapel's foundation stone presses into your spine. 12th century peasants buried horses with lords, a custom stolen from Scythian tombs. You've got barley cakes and resentment, poor substitutes for a loyal steed. The greaves slide sideways, iron singing against marble. Historians still argue whether warriors interred with armor expected skeleton armies to march again. Your bladder complains. Crusaders supposedly pissed in their sabatons to keep feet warm during sieges. You stand bundle hoisted like a stillborn child, and water desecrated Bishop Duran's effigy. The stone face scowls through golden streams. Catch, you mutter, tying laces with numb fingers. Wolves howl beyond the wall, or maybe just the wind gnawing at oaks. Bohemian legends say moonlight on armor summons spectral hounds. You count 12 heartbeats. Nothing materializes but drizzle. The faulds shed raindrops, tiny armor for tiny soldiers marching to war in puddles. Dawn's first smear grays the east. A night watchman's ballad drots from the garrison, off-key verses about cuckolded blacksmiths. You hum the chorus, knuckles tapping time on a vambrace. Music and metal, the twin languages of failed campaigns. The gauntlets slip free, crashing through ivy into an open crypt. Your curse wakes actual ravens this time. They croak in unison, a feathered jury condemning your clumsiness. Digging through rot and peach pits, your hand closes on cold fingers. The dead man's ring bears the night's crest, a serpent swallowing its tail. You pocket it before sanity objects. 9th century Persian mourners dropped inscribed silver coins into graves, bribes for afterlife tollkeepers. This skeleton wears only moss and apologies. Reaching blindly, your fingers brush a crackled scroll case. Historians would duel over its contents. You snap the brittle leather strap. Empty, of course. The ravens laugh again, wings clapping like cynical applause. Back on the sarcophagus, you unwrap the armor piece by piece. Each plate laid out resembles a dismembered knight, a puzzle missing its maker. Rain dents the pauldron's polished surface. 30 years ago, his squire oiled these joints. Now rainwater performs the rite. Your mother's voice drifts up, a half-remembered lullaby about wolves and weddings. She embroidered it with psalms about desert bones. You mouth the words, watch them dissolve between bell towers and mist. The hymn outlived her. The armor will outlive you. Sunrise bleeds through yew trees, the armor's shadow stretching long and thin across forgotten plots. Still, no one comes. The linen slips from the greave, exposing a line of jagged letters near the knee hinge. You squint at the scratches, too crude for battle tallies. Your name mocks you first, carved deep. The next words rust blurred, until sunlight hits the angle. Shame. He rhymed you with shame. A laugh barks out, startling sparrows from the chapel roof. Jesters in Queen Eleanor's court carried licensed baubles, legal immunity for roasting nobility. Your knight settled for doggerel and a dagger's point. Turn the greave more versus surface. Archery puns. A limerick involving a mule and a cardinal's hat. Dew soaks into your knees. 10th century Danes etched runic jokes on their axe handles, believing laughter made corpses lighter for Valhalla. The knight's humor feels heavier. You trace the crude S of your name, flakes of rust staining your fingerprint. Sunlight glints off a subarmali's buckle 3 graves away. Historians still argue whether warrior poets composed these lines mid-battle or added them later between tavern brawls. You prefer the third option, sheer boredom, during a 6-month siege. The greave fits your forearm like a vambrace now, the rhyme pressing into your pulse point. A wind stirs the yew trees, whispering through sword cuts on their trunks. Some fool in Milan sold armor ink during the Crusades, paint that hid messages under moonlight. You spit on the greave, rub until the letters smudge. It works better than the merchant's product ever did. The rhyme survives, shame outlasting both poet and target. Your shadow stretches across the grave, head warped by the visor's curve. 7 decades back, French squires dueled with spoons over dinner table insults. You fling the greave at a lichen-covered cross. It misses, plowing mud instead. Another chuckle floats at the edge of hearing maybe the thrush, maybe memory. You dig the metal free. A clump of red clay clings to the word shame, nature's editorial. Basque shepherds used to bury mocking songs in clay, letting rain erode the words over winters. This one's preserved too well. Breathing slows. The chapel's foundation stone grinds your spine, a familiar ache. You tuck the greave back into linen, nestling it between quizzes and regret. 3 crows land on the armor bundle, judges in black robes. Dawn's glare stripes the church wall, a prisoner's final hour. The rhyme itches under your skin, a phantom verse. You stand kicking the bundle into the grave. It lands with all the ceremony of dropped firewood. No oration, no roses, just a shovel's scrape and the distant cry of a hawk checking for stripped bones. His laughter fades with the shadows, leaving you ankle deep in fresh-turned earth and unanswered questions. The tabard crumples in your grip, gold embroidery unwinding like a traitor's confession. Silk moths flit from the folds, pale ghosts fat on royal thread. You sneeze. 8th century Byzantines believed moth dust cured gout or caused it. Hard to tell with ancient medicine. Strands of bullion catch your sleeve, each thread a silk core wrapped in gold leaf thinner than a lie. Real wealth back then, real weakness now. A draft swirls through the armory, scattering scales from the moth-eaten crest. Burgundy velvet disintegrates into paprika-colored dust. Historians still argue whether Crusader tabards bore saints' images for protection or just to scare peasants. One moth alights on your wrist, wings powdered with time. Its antennae twitch toward the remaining embroidery. You flick it off. Fife and drum corps are gone, buddy. Your knife parts fabric, a precise slit where the knight's personal sigil once blazed. An eye, a hawk, doesn't matter. Gold surrenders without protest, leaving a linen scrap no bigger than a pardon. You roll it tight, threads poking like accusations. Half-rotted lining reveals its secret, childish stitches mending a tear. The night's work, his sister's. Your thumb finds the bulge of a hidden bead. Carved volcanic glass, obsidian. Armenian merchants swore such stones absorbed battlefield screams. This one's silent as a vow. Moths mob the discarded tabard, a feathery siege. You pocket the scrap, its edges fraying against your ribs. 13th century regulations required squires to repair garb with 6 stitches per inch. Yours would fail inspection, like that time with the botched banner in Calais. Sunlight pierces the armory windows, spotlighting your theft. Dust motes writhe like tiny traitors. A sheen of gold lingers under your fingernails. Could have bought a village once. Now, barely worth a punchline at a tavern. The remaining embroidery collapses, a gilded landslide. Moths rise in a cloud, wing beats softer than parchment tearing. You exit backward, a squire's superstition. Never turn your spine to dead men's clothes. The door latch clicks. The scrap burns against your heart, a coward's coal. The scrap still warm in your pocket, you spot it coiled in the shadows. A circlet of rusted wire kinked where your practiced sword struck stone during drills. 13th century squires swung oak wasters weighted with lead to build muscle. This makeshift crown proves you skipped arm day. Twisted metal bites your palm, a wrestling match frozen in iron. Village smiths whispered bent tools held memories of their makers. This thing remembers your 10th summer and every parry that left you breathless. You tilt the helmet, its visor dented from that joust in Provence. Historians still argue whether practiced swords blunted more egos than blades. The circlet perches awkwardly, a rebellion against symmetry. Not a lord's diadem, a squire's question mark, hammered into shape. Wire scraps litter the floor, metal worms escape to forge's gut. One end curls up, an invitation. You step on it. The snap echoes like a disapproving grunt from the training yard. Light glints off the bent crest. Crusader kings wore gemmed crowns. Yours cost half a copper and 7 blisters. You adjust it. Watch shadows turn the crook into a sly grin. French chronicles claim Charlemagne's crown gave him migraines. Yours just leaves a red mark, a soldier's tattoo. A bead rolls from the helmet's crevice, glass or dried blood. Doesn't matter now. You blow dust off the circlet, forged in failure, but it fits. Sort of. Like most truths about yourself. Wind whistles through arrow slits, a tuneless fanfare. You salute yourself, a half bow to no audience. The crown slips, catches on your ear. Perfect. Let the armor laugh. You've stockpiled worse humiliations. Moths investigate your creation, landing on wire like courtiers, inspecting foreign coin. One flutters off, a winged critic. Regal, you mutter. If regal means barely functional. The circlet warms, or maybe your scalp's sweating. Either way, it stays. Let future squires find it, crooked testament to crooked paths. Let them wonder if purpose matters more than polish. Let them try it on lopsided and laughing. The wire crown's crooked embrace still hugs your brow as you cross the courtyard. The lance winks, its rusted tip wedged where the stable wall meets rotten timber. Not a proper display, more like a drunkard leaning after last call. You brace against wood worn smooth by rains and regret. 13th century lances were ash wood, flexible enough to survive impacts at 60 galloping horse lengths. This one's become part of the architecture, a rosette of corrosion, blooming where steel kisses oak. Gloves dangle from your belt stiff as salted fish. Horsehair pokes through frayed fingertips. Commoners believed squires polished armor with mare's saliva. You tried it once. The mare bit you. You tug the lance. It groans the wall, claiming its trophy. A splinter embeds itself under your nail. A squire's stigmata. Historians still argue whether stable boys hid victory nails in beam cracks for luck. If this is a victory, the joke's on you. The gloves feel heavier than chainmail. You loop their laces around the lance's throat, knotting them where the knight's hands once gripped. Sunset paints the leather crimson. 14th century cordwainers used walnut dye for noble clients. These are just brown, sad brown. Wind sneaks through the stable, swaying the gloves like hanged men. One finger twitches, or maybe it's the breeze. You step back. 11 paces, the exact length of a jousting barrier. Dust motes swirl where armored knees once bent. A beetle navigates the lance's pitted surface. You count its progress, 32 heartbeats to reach the wall. Some alphabets use beetles as symbols of resilience. This one's just hungry. The left glove's middle finger curls upward. Accident or insult? You snort. The knight would have approved. His humor was 90% profanity, 10% belches. You adjust the knot. The lace snaps, rotted threads surrendering. The glove somersaults into a patch of nettles. Shadows stretch long across the yard. You retrieve the rebel glove, its palm cradling a spider's egg sac. Tempting to leave it there, let new life guard old leather, but the knight hated spiders. You flick the eggs away. Both gloves hang crooked now, a marionette's hands waiting for strings. Stable roofs doubled as archery targets during sieges. Not that this dilapidated shed could stop a butter knife. You toss a pebble at the thatch. It punches through like parchment. Rust flakes snow onto your boots with every gust. Scholars debate whether iron remembers its forge. This lance only recalls neglect. You lick your thumb, rub the shaft. Grime comes away, exposing a ghost of engraving. Maybe a name. Maybe help me. Mice skitter in the hayloft, their squeaks mapping the silence. You mimic the knight's command voice. Halt, furry knaves. They don't halt. A dried apple core plops at your feet. Tougher crowds than the king's court. You lean your forehead against the lance's cold cheek. Someone once whispered that weapons absorb their owner's heartbeat. All you feel is your own pulse, a frantic messenger with no letters left to carry. The moon rises, its light slicing through cracked boards. You count 73 nails in the wall. 74, if you include the one in your thumb. The gloves sway, casting bat-wing shadows. Monks wrote that gloves symbolized a warrior's second skin. These look more like shed snakeskin. Boots crunch gravel behind you. You don't turn. Let them see the shrine, the lance's stubborn vigil. Let them mistake abandonment for devotion. Breath hitches in your throat, the same way it did when the knight first let you hold his shield. A hoofbeat echoes from the road. Not your concern anymore. You press a rust flake between thumb and forefinger. Watch it crumble. Iron oxide particle by particle returning to the earth. The gloves twist, kicking air. You imagine them floating downstream, clutching nothing. Wind dies. The lance creaks, a ship's mast in dead calm. You hum the marching song they played at his pyre. Only the mice stay to hear the finale. The wax pool trembles, reflecting your warped face in molten amber. Vambraces lie upturned like beetle carcasses, their cracks gasping upward. 8th century smiths mixed beeswax with crushed oyster shells for repairs. You've got tallow candles pilfered from the chapel close enough, dripping wax steams as it meets cold steel. The smell clings, burnt honey, with undertones of priestly disapproval. Medieval surgeons used candle wax to seal wounds on the battlefield. You wonder if screaming made their sutures straighter. Your pinky nail scoops excess wax, an improvised trowel. It hardens instantly, a fleshy thimble. Visitors to Warwick Castle still find armor seams glittering with beeswax fossils. These vambraces will fossilize your fingerprints instead. A hairline fracture on the left cuff mocks you. Historians still argue whether squires chewed wax to soften it before application. You try, regret immediately, spit gritty tallow into the rushes. Tastes like desperation and wick trimmings. Each dribble traces the metal scars, white rivers over battlefield topography. The right vambrace shelters a dead spider in its elbow crease. You encase it, making a 6-legged insect paperweight. The knight would have called it a waste of wax. Your sleeve catches fire. Again. You slap it out, adding singed wool to the armory's bouquet of odors. 14th century candle makers added lavender to mask's tallow stench. These votives smell of monkish austerity and lung congestion. Fingerprints smudge the cooling wax, your whorls preserved alongside sword strikes. Renaissance scholars believed palm lines predicted fates. These grooves foretell blisters and a persistent waxy sheen behind your ears. Midnight gnaws at the candle stubs. 3 remain their wicks drowning in wax coffins. You light all 3, a final blaze of illumination. Burgundian squires raced candlelit armor pieces downhill during summer solstice. Your race ends here with wax stalactites threatening the wood grain. The left vambrance develops a lopsided wax mustache. Can't decide if it's dapper or deranged. You snap it off, toss it into the brazier. Flames hiss, releasing phantom scents of forgotten feasts. Knuckles brush freshly sealed grooves, still warm. Wax bulges between plates like congealed fat. At least the cracks are sealed. The armorer's rhyme floats back, wax the rift, gift the thrift, mind the shift. Still don't know what mind the shift meant. Greaves watch from the corner, their dents accusing. Tomorrow's problem. Your tunic's hem is now 50% wax by volume. Carolingian law fined knights for presenting sloppy sealed armor. The fine, 3 chickens or a knight in the stocks. You'd take the chickens. Dawn leaks through arrow slits, turning wax translucent. Veins of ancient repairs surface beneath your botched ones. Ghost layers of other squires' haste. A beetle navigates the terrain, skating across smooth patches, detouring around your lumpy contributions. You press an ear to the wax steel. No breath, just the brazier's dying gurgle. Byzantine soldiers swore wax-filled armor whispered during night watches. All you hear is last night's lentil soup, protesting its fate. Prying the vambraces free leaves wax moons under your nails. They'll linger for days, semi-transparent reminders of this pointless vigil. Your palms resemble old parchment dipped in grease. The brazier exhales one last smoke ring. 12 wax droplets harden on the anvil, miniature helmets glinting in weak sunlight. You pocket one, a souvenir for someone who'll never ask. Wind sneaks through the arrow slit, testing your repairs. The wax holds. For now, you blow out the candles, taste smoke and extinction on your lips. Candlelight's kinder, hiding the wax's uneven sprawl. Sunlight is brutally honest. Armor clanks as you stand, a discordant fanfare. The waxed vambraces gleam with false health, like rouge on a feverish cheek. Tomorrow they'll tarnish again. But tonight, let them pretend. Footsteps echo down the corridor, too light to be guards. Let them come. Let them see the wax-sealed relics and the squire breathing in sacred smoke. Your fingers close around the stolen wax helmet, edges sharp enough to draw blood. Mice emerge from the arrow slit, silent as unspilled secrets. Their shadows ripple across your wax-stiffened tunic, a council of whiskered jurists. Medieval castles employed pest control boys with terriers. You've upgraded to diplomatic relations. The largest mouse perches on an overturned greave, gray fur parted like court curtains. You address it as Lord Snoutingham. The title feels deserved. Archaeologists found a mouse nest woven from chainmail fragments in Chateau Gaillard's ruins. Yours prefer grudges to knitting. Our first agenda item, you whisper, tapping the wax helmet in your palm. 3 mice turn, ears pivoting like miniature siege engines. Historians still argue whether medieval lords took rodent petitions seriously. The Duke of Burgundy's grain ledger lists mice tribute. Besides salt taxes, interpretations vary. A juvenile mouse gnaws your bootlace. Ambitious filibustering. You flick a wax crumb onto the floor. Parliament dissolves into chaos. 14th century pastologists believed mice could smell weakness. These ones definitely smell the pork grease under your thumbnail. Quorum, you snap, startling yourself. The Lord Speaker freezes mid-lichen lick. Your voice softens. We must discuss armor disposal logistics. The mice blink, black beads reflecting candlelight. Tudor rat catchers wore iron shin guards to prevent ankle rebellions. You're defenseless in wool socks. Wind howls through the armory, stirring parchment ghosts. The mice press into a furry phalanx against the draft. Burgundy's rodents reportedly triggered a siege delay by nesting in cannonball crates. You suspect revisionist rodent propaganda. I could sell the cuirass for scrap, you propose. Lord Snoutingham rears up, paws clasped like a dissenting barrister. A field mouse drags a moth carcass into the circle counterproposal. Your childhood cat once brought identical gifts. The memory stings worse than wax burns. Or melt it down, you persist. Make brackets for the chapel's rotten beams. The council groom themselves, universal gesture of bureaucratic indifference. Renaissance metallurgists claimed mouse saliva could rust iron overnight. You check the nearest gauntlet, no new corrosion. Disappointing. The bold juvenile springs onto your knee, agent of chaos. Its nose quivers an inch from your wax-crusted fingernail. Medieval recipes recommended mouse ash potions for courage. You resist the urge to test this. Barely. Compromise, you sigh. We dismantle it together. You take the padding for nests. I keep the buckles. Lord Snoutingham twitches his tail, possibly a veto. 17th century. Mouse traps used armor fragments as counterweights. Evolution has been unkind to their descendants' survival instincts. Dawn pales the eastern arrow slit. The council retreats all but the moth-bearer lingering by your heel. You name it, Sir Movies. It flees the title. Your breath frosts in the suddenly empty armory. Chronicles mention bishops blessing rodent colonies as God's humble auditors. No blessings here, just crumbs and unsoldered plans. The wax helmet bites your palm, edges gone soft with body heat. You set it beside the brazier, a tiny sentinel guarding embers. Mice taught medieval scribes about nibbled parchment edges and rewritten histories. Tomorrow's tasks will reshape yesterday's steel, whether the council approves or not. Thunder splits the sky, a drunk minstrel banging the world's largest tambourine. Shutters rattle like a skeleton's teeth. You fumble with the gauntlets, their steel chilled by the storm's breath. Lightning blanches the armory for half a heartbeat. Your hands look armored again. The left gauntlet sticks at the knuckles, rusted hinges protesting. Medieval smiths treated armor joints with beeswax and pig fat. You'd kill for pig fat right now, or beeswax, or pigs. The right one slides on smoother, a mercy considering your throbbing elbow. Wind screams through arrow slits, draft tasting of wet stone and burnt ozone. Your thumb brushes the gauntlet's inner lining, horsehair, padding gone brittle as old vows. A tiny rose engraving appears in the next lightning burst, faded near the wrist. Historians still argue whether Florentine gauntlet roses symbolized love or possession. You pick spite. Rain drums chainmail dangling from the far wall, a metallic hiss like serpent disapproval. Your gauntleted fingers curl, familiar grooves hugging your bones. 13th century Persian manuscripts describe knights testing armor fit by catching falcons mid-flight. You catch a moth instead. It escapes through the pinky joint. Thunder's encore shakes dust from the rafters. You pivot toward the sound, creaking like a poorly oiled drawbridge. A puddle forms beneath the leaky ceiling. Your boot displaces, water blackened by armor polish. At Agincourt, men drowned face down in mud, wearing gear lighter than this. The thought clings tighter than the gauntlets. Lightning flares, your shadow looms colossal across the flagstones. For 3 wild seconds, you're a giant, astride a thundercloud, gauntlets raised to catch the storm's fury. Then darkness returns, shrinking you back to a squire with poor posture. The storm howls, a wounded titan. You press gauntlets to your ears, steel conducting cold into your skull. Someone's scratched initials inside the right cuff, B1411. Maybe Edmund Blackthorn, maybe every bastard. Rust makes archaeologists of us all. Rainwater courses down the gauntlet's ridges, miniature rivers tracing old battle scars. You hold them under the worst leak. Let precipitation polish what stone cannot. 16th century Scottish nobles washed armor in holy water for luck. This seems more practical. Your pinky goes numb, circulation strangled by medieval sizing standards. Taking them off would be wise. You mutter words absorbed by the thunder. Removing them requires wrestling a particularly stubborn crab. Your wrist hair pays the toll. The storm relents, reduced to petulant muttering. Gray dawn leaks through cloud cover. You unlace the gauntlets, twin exhalations of released pressure. Their outline remains on your skin, ghost armor lingering like a lover's touch. When lightning last struck York Cathedral in 1463, melted armor fused to the nave floor. Your own steel sits unscorched, prosaic, in its survival. You balance them on the drying rack, fingers splayed like a blacksmith's diagram. Last year's swallows built a nest in the left one. You leave it undisturbed. The right gauntlet still holds your hand's shape, steel memorizing flesh. Tomorrow's rain will erase it. Tonight, for one clammy hour, you wore more than iron. You wore what rust cannot eat. You step into the courtyard, boots squelching in storm-sodden earth. The well's curbstone leans like a drunkard's smile. One gauntlet weighs heavy in your grip, steel fingernails biting your palm. The well's throat exhales dampness, lichen, and secrets. Pebbles skitter underfoot as you approach. 13th century monasteries often built wells with 7 sides, one for each deadly sin. This one's a lopsided circle. The builder clearly favored sloth. Your shadow wavers on the moss-veined stones, a sentinel without a sword. The gauntlet's remaining horsehair padding tickles your wrist. You dangle it over the void, iron fingers curling in farewell. In 2004, workers cleaning a burgundy well found 32 left shoes. Historians still argue whether it was ritual or someone's terrible packing error. Letting go feels like unclenching a fist you've held for decades. The gauntlet spins, catching weak sunlight on its rose engraving. Your lips count seconds, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3, as if measuring a ghost's descent. Medieval children played well wishes, tossing pebbles while shouting secrets they wanted erased. 12 seconds pass before the splash. A muffled clang echoes, upward iron meeting water at terminal velocity. Your ribs vibrate with the sound, an underground bell tolling for discarded things. Some say old wells mirror the sky, that coins became stars in their private heavens. This one coughs up darkness instead. Leaning over the edge, you inhale petrichor and iron oxide. The gauntlet's final resting place smells like a blacksmith's nightmares. Crusaders supposedly hurled captured Saracen armor into Jerusalem wells to poison the land. You're just tidying up. Mostly. A drip echoes, plink, 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 marking time in liquid increments. Your knees creak as you rise, old injuries conducting the damp like fiddle strings. 16th century London had well divers who retrieved lost valuables and occasionally corpses. The job paid 3 shillings plus hazard wine. You'd settle for brandy. Wind riffles your tunic, an insistent hand urging you away, but you linger, half expecting the gauntlet to climb back out, rusty fingers scrabbling at stone. 3 generations of swallows nest in the well's cracks, their droppings painting white streaks like hurried constellations. One chirps accusingly. The gauntlet doesn't surface. It joins swords, chamber pots, love letters weighted with beads, all sinking into aquifer memory. Archaeologists will debate this moment in 8 centuries, carbon dating your indecision. Let them. You wipe well muck on your breeches, the medieval equivalent of a mic drop. Sunlight fractures through retreating clouds. Somewhere below, a steel hand points eternally downward, a compass needle frozen in defeat. You pocket a pebble, souvenir of abandonment. The walk back to the armory feels lighter, though your boots still squelch. The helmet's hollow grins up at you, tarnished teeth framing empty shadows. Your palms cradle its weight, lighter now that its owner's laughter has drained away. Barley grains trickle from your sleeve pouch, secrets stolen from the stable master's feed bin. You pause, spade hovering over the helmet's crown. 10th century farmers believed planting during a waning moon cursed crops. 2 bad lunar cycles never stopped wars, or the knights who fought them. Rainwater pools in the visor's crevices. You mix it with stolen sacramental wine. Kneeling, you push grains into the cushion of rust and horsehair lining. Roman soldiers grew barley in their shields during sieges, emergency rations sprouting beside arrows. Your version feels less practical, more eulogy. The soil here reeks of damp wool and defeat. 3 weeks pass. Green spears pierce the helmet's scalp, straining toward narrow armory windows. You whisper insults to encourage growth, an old trick Benedictine monks used on stubborn figs. Historians still argue whether medieval armor gardens existed, or if we've confused battle filth for intentional cultivation. Dawn light gilds the barley shoots. They twist left, yearning for a sun that never quite reaches them. A mouse nibbles one blade, then recoils from the wine-soured soil. You defend your crops with a wooden spoon sent Drogo's patronage of coffee suddenly making sense. The barley outgrows its metal skull. You consider transplanting it, but roots cling to rust like stubborn squires. At night, you catch yourself humming harvest hymns. The knight would have hated this, always preferred his ale unmixed with agricultural effort. Harvest day arrives. You slice the golden stalks with a dagger, blunt edge mangling the task. Grain yield, 12 anemic seeds. Victory, roasting them over a candle, you crush the result into dust. Medieval bread this ain't. You sprinkle the powder into the knight's empty wine flask. It clinks against dried dregs, a toast of sweat and toothless ambition. Outside, the first snow smothers the barracks garden. Your helmet's crop stands bare, its purpose served. Wind rattles the armory shutters. Somewhere beneath the frost, next year's barley waits. You lift the helmet, shake out the soil, and set it back on its shelf. For now, you unwind the last length of burial linen, the scratch of flax fibers, loud as a sword, drawn in silence. 3 layers for nobility, 7 for saints. You settle on 5, a bastard count no priest would bless. Thread counts obsessed Egyptian embalmers. They claimed tighter weaves trapped souls longer. Your stitching curves like the Nile, uneven but determined. The breastplate resists wrapping, edges biting into fabric. Armor interred fully was rare, scrap metal, usually repurposed for plowshares or bastard swords. Historians still argue whether any knights received full tomb regalia, or if chroniclers just craved poetic endings. You force a knot, your thumb bleeding where the greaves rust kissed it. Dawn seeps through arrow slits. Last night's frost melts down the walls, old stone weeping. You drag the bundle toward the armory's eastern alcove, a 12th century addition built over Roman bath ruins. Someone scrubbed the mosaic floor's phallus symbols, but their outlines linger under your boots. A mouse watches from the barley helmet, seed thief turned mourner. You tuck the flask of powdered grain into the linen folds, a grave good for hungry ghosts. 15 monasteries once claimed scraps of Charlemagne's shroud, faked relics smelling of turnip wine. Your offerings equally fraudulent, but the mouse doesn't complain. Buckled metal creaks inside its cocoon, an insect ready for metamorphosis. Sunlight hits the shelf where the armor lay for decades. The silhouette remains, a shadow fossil in the grime. You spit on your sleeve, scrub, until the stone burns raw under your palm. No bells mark this funeral. Wind fills the silence, whistling through the lance-riddled stable wall outside. You suck blood from your thumb, iron and salt. Burial parties during the Black Death War plague doctors' robes stuffed with rose hips. You've got cobwebs and regret. When the linen bundle finally stills, it resembles a child's doll dropped mid-play. You half expect it to twitch, demand one last whetstone session. Instead, dust motes dance where the night's breath should be. A spider claims the alcove ceiling, spinning silk epaulets. The armory door groans open behind you. No one enters. Dawn's orange fingers pry at every corner, exposing the patched, tabard, the crooked wire circlet, the map-stained shield. Shadows retreat to the rafters, your leather boots sole-deep in light. You flex empty hands, no gauntlets to stiffen your fingers. Somewhere beyond these walls, the barley you spilled last autumn pushes through snow, roots splitting armor rust, shoots cracking frozen earth. The cycle continues, unburied, unblessed, alive. Floorboards creak as you turn toward the threshold. Your shadow stretches ahead, long as a lance, thin as the night's final laugh. You step into the light. The door swings shut, oil-starved hinges screaming like widows. Morning claims the armory. You smooth the last fold of linen, the fabric's roughness now softened by dawn light. 5 layers, neither royal nor sacred, hold their shape like a lullaby hummed off-key. The alcove breathes slow, cold stone exhaling centuries of iron and sweat. Your palms rest where the breastplate once pressed, still warm as if the metal mourns its unmooring. A spiderling descends on silk thread, claiming the empty shelves, shadow as its kingdom. Rust grains glitter in sunbeams, fool's gold for whoever finds this half-prayer. The mouse retreats, barley seeds tucked like heirloom pearls beneath its tongue. You step back, bootprints ghosting the mosaic's forgotten stories. Wind nudges the door wider, carrying the scent of thawed earth and distant sheep. No priests chant here, only the creak of oak beams settling into rot. Your breath feathers the air, one white wisp dissolving before it reaches the rafters. The armor's silence is complete now, a hush woven into the very flax. You linger at the threshold, nightless, but not empty. Somewhere beyond these walls, where frozen streams crack into song, snowdrop buds nudge through the night's buried spurs. Life insists. Spring gnaws winter's armor. The door closes with a tired sigh, iron hinges bending like an old man's spine. Light spills across the alcove floor, gilding dust, motes into a procession of tiny lanterns. You walk away, your shadow thinning to nothing in the milky sun. Morning cradles the armory, patient, gentle, its arms full of nothing but peace.